Hello again, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to another informative webinar in cStor's Tech Series. Today's event features Joshua Moore, Principal Technologist of Cloud Analytics at NetApp. And today's session, Control the Performance and Utilization of Your Cloud Workloads with NetApp Cloud Insights. And we also welcome Neil Williams, Sales Director at cStor. Thank you, gentlemen, for attending. I'm Kim, your webinar organizer for today's event. Neil?
Thanks, Kim. Good morning, everyone. I was hoping that the team would allow me to use my camera today, and if they did, I was going to have my cat filter on. For those of you that have not seen the cat filter video that's trending this morning, my first recommendation, the first thing you do after you get off this call is go watch that. It is well worth your time. So for those of you not familiar with cStor, we do recommend things other than viral videos. We've been in business for more than 20 years, based out of the Phoenix, Scottsdale area, but with offices in New Mexico and Nevada. We do work all over the United States with our clients, but we focus in the Southwest. We focus on three key areas of business. So digital transformation, cybersecurity, and data center solutions. What's really great about today's presentation is we're going to kind of cover the tool we're showing today covers all three of these areas. So it's wildly effective. The tool we're highlighting today, whenever a client starts the conversation with, we wish we knew how to, about 8 times out of 10, the tool we're talking about today will solve that problem. So that kind of goes into the vendor agnostic piece. This is a tool that fits into any environment. We're highly specialized, as in we focus in those three key areas. If you've got a problem with your wireless solution, we're probably not the best fit. If you want to, refresh your core network, we can do that for you, but that's not where we focus. So we always put our clients first. We're always vendor agnostic, and we like to think of ourselves as highly specialized. And the most important part of our business is, anyone can sell you a product. We like to wrap our solutions with really, really smart people who know how those products will work in your environment. So whether it's staff aug or consulting or implementation or managed services, we want to find the right solution for our customers in every situation. So with that, I'm going to introduce Josh Moore. Josh, take it away.
Thank you, Neil. I am Josh. I hail from NetApp. I'm a principal technologist. If anyone can decipher what that means, I know I certainly can. What I do spend a lot of my time doing is talking to people and listening to people, primarily in the area of cloud analytics. So what are your problems and how can we help them? And feeding that ultimately into this product we're looking at today called Cloud Insights. But first, I want to set the scene with a few concepts here. So those familiar with NetApp and many that are not should be familiar with the concept of the data fabric. So at NetApp, we don't believe that infrastructure limitations should control how you deploy and develop and grow and scale applications. It's your data, they're your applications. You should be able to do with them what you want. So whether that is moving things from on-prem to the cloud, or retreating from the cloud and moving it back on-prem, or running across both. Of course, the kind of DevOps mindset has really exacerbated a lot of the issues, but given us a lot of flexibility with how we deploy applications and what platforms we run them on going forward. So the data fabric is all about control. It's up to you how you want to run your services and your applications. But it does introduce a number of issues. So today, what I wanted to do is not necessarily show any slides or even a demo per se. I'd like to take everyone through some issues we've run into in, ultimately eating our own dog food of the data fabric, and how we have solved them with Cloud Insights. So if the data fabric is what allows you to run applications anywhere with ease, I would call Cloud Insights the observability fabric that underpins it. So all of the potential challenges that creates, this is a little bit about how we solve it. So that really creates challenges for us in three key areas of monitoring, optimization, and securing our data. And Cloud Insights helps us in those three ways by giving us a nice overall visibility of what's running where and a consistent view of metrics across all of these different environments. A consistent data model so we can track where utilization is going up and down, and most importantly, where we've provisioned resources that we aren't effectively utilizing, because especially when we talk about workloads in the cloud, that is, has an immediate impact on the bottom line if we can refresh those. And of course, security as well, which has to be top of mind for everyone today, particularly with ransomware, because it's not something that it's effectively impossible to prevent, right? So we'll look at a few ways in NetApp how we can detect ransomware very quickly and perform automated actions based on what sort of profile it fits. So we'll start with monitoring, and I will jump over to the tool itself. So this is a environment we have at NetApp. So it's comprised of a number of on-prem labs all over the world in more than a dozen different data centers, and also our hybrid cloud labs in all three major hyperscalers. You will see a lot of NetApp in this environment. Funnily enough, surprise, surprise, we use a lot of NetApp at NetApp. But actually, this is a vendor agnostic tool, as you mentioned earlier, right? We don't want to lock anyone into a specific vendor in Cloud Insights. Whilst you see a great number of NetApp products and services in this list, if we go to add collectors, we can talk to just about anything in anyone's environment, whether it's getting metrics and monitoring from applications, whether it's looking at Docker or Kubernetes, whether it's looking at other vendor storage, whether it's looking at Hyper-V and VMware for on-prem private cloud, or potentially AWS and Azure for public cloud resources. And this all just feeds into the premise that we don't want to restrict users and tell them what they can use. So we actually have open collectors in the form of Telegraph, which can ingest metrics from any device out there. So I guess to answer the question of what does Cloud Insights support, everything effectively. So we'll take a look at some monitoring use cases first. And this is an interesting view that we started using in NetApp internally some time ago. So one of the issues, I guess, that we have, that we used to have in NetApp, is that applications, well, they're quite complex and they span multiple layers of infrastructure. So we cast our mind back to the dark ages, and we had a storage team that only did storage, and if it wasn't about storage, well, we don't talk to the storage team. Funnily enough, the storage team didn't talk to the VM team, the VM team didn't talk to the applications team, nobody talked to the network team. And actually getting to the bottom of an issue was very difficult because nobody talked to each other, and every layer of infrastructure effectively had its own language. So I'm sure many of you can think of a case in your own companies, in your own environments, where there's a high severity incident. It's an all hands on deck scenario, and everyone logs into a bridge, probably in the middle of the night for good measure, and points fingers at everybody else until someone just by chance figures out what's wrong. Well, this sort of view is a full stack troubleshooting view to kind of get to the bottom of where a problem is. If you visualize a event or an incident timeline, really there's two phases of that timeline. There's the mean time to resolution, is the point from where we figure out that something is wrong, a user calling up the help desk and saying this application is broken, to ultimately figuring out what's wrong with the problem and fixing it. Well, actually, the vast majority of that timeline is the first half, which I like to call the mean time to innocence. So that is basically figuring out what the problem is and figuring out who needs to fix it, and ultimately when everybody else can go back to their day job. And this sort of view of troubleshooting has allowed us to massively reduce the mean time to innocence for issues in our infrastructure. And we do that by visualizing the application as a stack here, with all of the key speeds and feeds from every layer in that stack. So if we go back to the top here, you can see that there is a high request duration. So I don't necessarily need to be the application owner to realize that this is an application in trouble, because this 27 milliseconds doesn't necessarily mean anything to me if I am maybe in the storage team or the network team. But what does mean something to me is that this box is red here and there's an exclamation mark in it. So whether I am the application owner, whether I am the business unit manager, or whether I am any one of any technical staff on the team, I know that this application has an issue. So I need to find out, well, where is the issue? So I can scroll through this application-wide dashboard to identify where that problem is. And it starts, this is a web application, so it starts at the web layer. And again, I don't necessarily need to be the web admin to understand what's going on here, because what I can see is there's nothing jumping out here. So, the session cache peak, whatever that is, if I'm not the web admin, it's at 1.37 milliseconds. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, but it's got a green check mark next to it. So I know that I can probably move on from blaming the web team for this issue. The load balancer response times are well under this particular red line here. So again, I don't have to understand what these are. I just understand that these key metrics called out by the web team are within allowable tolerances. Now, once we get to the database layer, things get more interesting. So the elastic heap usage, again, might not know what it means, but it's under the red line, so I know I'm pretty safe there. But what's more interesting is the MySQL buffer pool. So again, I've got a red box here that says this is an application in trouble. Now, if I'm the DBA looking at this full stack dashboard, I might want to go investigate what the issue is. But if I'm not the DBA, I can at least identify that there is a potential problem with MySQL without necessarily having to be the deep dive expert. I can continue to scroll through this dashboard to see if I can connect any more dots. So I can see that the peak latency for a handful of on-prem VMs is well over the kind of thresholds I've defined. I can see which particular virtual machine here is with a problem with the web server. And if I'm a storage person, I really like this dashboard because the storage team kind of historically gets the blame for a lot of the issues because ultimately it's at the bottom of a stack and it's very difficult to prove a negative. But what I can see here, and what anyone in the organization can see here, is that the storage isn't necessarily at fault here. Now, what I haven't done is, on this particular VM, I haven't been able to, from here, identify a particular process ID that's overrunning or causing issues. But what I have done is I've gotten to my, reduce my mean time to innocence. So I know where the fault is. I know which application, in this case, MySQL, on that particular server is having the issue. And I can go and use my deep dive expert tools to troubleshoot more closely, or I could, alternatively use Cloud Insights to dig deeper into the problem. So this is a kind of a full stack view of an application that allows me to connect the dots to figure out and to triage issues very, very quickly. I've talked through this dashboard over the course of several minutes, but with this nice connect the dots view where I can just see the red and follow it to the problem, I can reach that mean time to innocence very, very quickly and get the right people on the job fixing the problem as soon as possible to get services back up and running. So I mentioned earlier, at the point of finding the problem, you have options of going into deep dive tools that, a lot of people still like to use their specific tool sets and element managers. But of course, we can do this in Cloud Insights as well. So this is an example of a virtual machine performance monitoring dashboard where you have a quick overview of where problem areas may be and can dive into areas where we might be able to fix that. So in this example, I'm highlighting the top latency for my top 10 VMs. Again, I don't want to see the latency for every VM in the entire environment. Just show me the things that I might want to do something about. So I can set filters and finders to only show me machines over a certain latency, or, in the case of storage, volumes over a certain latency or something like that. Now, if I see something I don't like here, all of these views are dynamic. So one of the other problems that, we've always run into with troubleshooting is that, and one of the reasons that frankly the storage team very often gets the blame, is that a contended resource can often look like the device itself is an issue. So in this case, we've got a virtual machine here, the Nginx web server, that is in trouble. So you can see it's raised a violation here where latency is over the threshold that's allowed. Now, a latency problem typically, gets the storage team to have the fingers pointed at them to go and fix it, because latency is a function of storage, right? Well, in this case, what Cloud Insights has actually done is auto-correlated the backend resources to identify that, yes, there is fundamentally a storage issue here with high latency. However, it's not the storage in of itself that's a problem. So Cloud Insights has identified another greedy resource. So in this case, a virtual machine on using the same storage backend that is actually causing degradation. So the IOPS of this particular virtual machine are causing the latency spike on another. So this has, really helped us with that kind of tendency to finger point when we have performance issues in NetApp, and to really have a more collaborative view of, finding the root cause of issues and fixing them. So instead of, saying, I've got a virtual machine here, it's got a problem, let's go throw it over to another team to fix, I can actually go and talk to, potentially back in the good old days when we could go into an office, go across the office and go talk to the MongoDB team and say, hey guys, are you doing anything that may be impacting my application? So instead of raising a call to the help desk or support center and waiting for something to be resolved, I can just go in, peer-to-peer, get these issues resolved sooner rather than later. And this has helped us streamline our troubleshooting process at NetApp a great deal. So when it comes to troubleshooting, Kubernetes has a bit of a reputation for being a dark art, and that's totally fair, right? It's very complex. So one of the issues we had when heavily adopting Kubernetes is that we had a handful of Kubernetes rock stars in our SRE team, and there is, if there's anything that they don't know about Kubernetes, it's just not worth knowing. The problem is those Kubernetes rock stars are quite finite, and we've got a huge IT team that kind of gets it what it is, but doesn't necessarily know how to use those specialist tools to figure out what's going on wrong. So much like the kind of full stack dashboard you saw earlier, we've created a very simple workflow for finding issues in a Kubernetes cluster. So you can see here we have a Kubernetes cluster in this environment that's usually ironically called indestructible because it's usually broken. I mean, ultimately, it's kind of, Kubernetes is designed to fail and designed to be resilient in the event of failure. So that's not necessarily a problem. It's actually looking pretty healthy today. But what we can do is navigate into the cluster and have this very visual view here of where I have problems, if I had problems in this particular environment, and go and, again, like the last view, find where I've got red or yellow pods in an alerting status, and just zoom into where the problem is. So if we pick one here, I'll go for this one. I can zoom in to this particular node, see all the pods and containers running on it, see my resource utilization, my CPU and memory and file system utilization, and something that's pretty unique to Cloud Insights, I can actually zoom as far in as the underlying storage. So if I, for instance, look at this particular pod here, I can see that it has a persistent volume claim and even map that through to the backend storage volume that it's running on. So this can be a big blind spot when it comes to not only troubleshooting Kubernetes issues that may be to do with backend storage, but also attributing that for the purposes of, chargeback and showback reporting and things like that. So this sort of capability allows you to say, this pod is costing X amount and using X amount of storage at the back end, which within a lot of, the deep dive SRE sort of Kubernetes tools can be, as I say, a bit of a blind spot. And this has allowed us to get control of not only performance in our Kubernetes environment, but also, just do a better job of optimizing and reducing waste in the environment. So sometimes monitoring is just a case of, seeing a view and having your morning coffee view of the world, seeing something you don't like and going in to fix it. But of course, we have the capability within Cloud Insights to have smart filters and finders around various conditions in the environment, and to highlight problems, by email, or we like to use Slack personally, to highlight issues when there is a certain condition, so that our SRE team can get on top of it straight away. So within Cloud Insights, you can define all sorts of filters and finders to kind of filter noise out of the environment. You can see a view here where we've got different thresholds for warning and critical, because what we don't want to do is just set a blanket threshold across the entire environment and then spam everybody with alerts here, there, and everywhere. So this sort of view allows users across all sorts of disciplines in our IT teams, whether they're the Kubernetes guys, whether they're the storage team or the DBAs, to go in, find something that they are particularly interested in. So for instance, this is Kubernetes CPU utilization, and define thresholds across the environment. So this applies to any Kubernetes within our entire environment. So the beauty of this is that you can have a variety of standard practices in your organization. For instance, the storage team has a latency threshold that anything above that is no good. So they can set one threshold for latency on a storage type object, and that applies whether it is NetApp storage or HP storage or EMC storage, or potentially AWS, Azure, or Google storage. So it lets you set it in one place once and get it just how you want it, whether that's in an email or to a Slack channel, or to a ticket in your ServiceNow environment, or whatever works for you. Again, Data Fabric is about you doing what works for you and not what the tools let you do or don't. So I mentioned optimization earlier, and one of the challenges that we've found that kind of this Data Fabric introduces is that when you have your infrastructure and applications in so many different baskets, optimizing those baskets can become very difficult and very time consuming, because there's a lot of great tool sets within the public cloud providers that let you monitor and track usage for that public cloud provider. So for instance, if you're an AWS user, you'll be very familiar with the AWS cost and utilization report. In itself, I don't find it a great resource to identify who's using what, but there are a variety of tools on AWS that help you decode that, figuring out who your top consumers are, figuring out where you're spending money. What it doesn't do is help you with your Azure consumption. What it doesn't do is help you with your on-prem consumption. So optimizing can really be a case of, unfortunately, Excel kind of still rules in a lot of organizations when it comes to kind of overall reporting. And it makes answering simple questions not so simple anymore. Now, one example of a simple question I can demonstrate here is, where have I got big VMs that aren't doing much? So where can I take large instances in AWS, for example, and downgrade them a couple of instance types to save some money? Because ultimately, if I have a huge VM with 16, 32 cores that's just sitting idle the vast majority of the time, that's a waste of money. It doesn't necessarily mean I can blast it away, but maybe it means I can turn it into a smaller instance type. So to answer a simple question, we have a simple set of filters and finders in Cloud Insights we call queries. So in this case, I'm looking for objects of virtual machine type. Now this, you can see live feedback here, that it brings up a view of the just shy of 2,000 VMs we have in this environment. Now, these are a variety of on-prem, Amazon, Azure, and Google VMs. So the first question I want to ask is, well, just show me the big ones here. So I can filter out by the number of processors in the VM, or the number of cores in this case, and only show VMs that I consider to be large, so over 16 cores. And we can see live feedback here that our list of 2000 has gone down to 125. And I'm starting to answer the question. So large VMs that aren't doing much. So I can go for CPU utilization. And I would say that anything that's averaged, less than, let's say 5% over the last 3 days, I can consider that, maybe this is something that I would want to downgrade. So I add those filters in. My 96 before, I think it was, goes down to 48. Now you can see here there's a variety of virtual machines that are on-prem. If I was to give those a smaller allocation of cores, it wouldn't necessarily save me anything. It might make managing my VMware environment a bit easier, but it doesn't immediately impact my bottom line. So if I was the AWS bill payer, for instance, I could add in AWS here, and just like that, take my list of 2000 virtual machines down to only large VMs that aren't doing much in AWS. And then I've got this list of 44 virtual machines here that I could export and send to the bill payer to do something about. I could click through and see who's using this, what team is responsible for it, associate the virtual machine here with the metadata pulled from ServiceNow to identify what applications it's running. Is it production? Is it development? But the crucial thing here is that a question which was actually really difficult to answer before, I could answer here in just a few minutes by selecting a few filters and finders to find these kind of wasteful VMs. Another thing we have found to be quite effective in controlling cost in the cloud particularly is the concept of a morning coffee view that frames wastage in a way that really the administrators of the environment can relate to. So I guess one way that's we've found to be a particularly poor way of controlling costs in the cloud is to take reports with dollars and cents on it and beat people over the head with it. Because I think there's a pretty consistent response we get from our our SRE teams and our dev teams and our admin teams that say, well, end of the day, my application's important. I have two options. It can be expensive and perform very well, or it can be cheap and not perform very well. And I know which every dev and SRE in the world is going to pick option A. It needs to perform ultimately, because if it doesn't perform, they get beaten over the head with a bigger stick than if it does perform, but it's just kind of expensive. So within our kind of cloud admin teams, we've got this morning coffee concept. So these are the first views of the world you see when you log in the morning to control what happens and control where the environment is and control what they can do in the environment. So we've got this view here where you can see abandoned storage, overkill when it comes to storage that's on fast storage that can be demoted to slow storage, and things like that. Again, it's the top views of instances that may have been forgotten and can be demoted to kind of lower performing instances. And these are the views that our cloud admins focus on to control costs in their environment without realizing they're controlling cost. It kind of taps into that kind of developer psyche that, I want my application to be lean and mean. The side effect of that is that actually it's cheaper in the long run as well. We can also see views in Cloud Insights very directly of cost of, how this, where I can reallocate storage in AWS to start saving money, and have views of performance where I'm provisioning high-speed storage when I could provision, the less costly variety, and also by user as well. So I can see who's consuming the most resources in terms of processor, memory, and things like that in my environment, to go and talk to those people and find out, what are you doing? Do you need these resources? Or is it something that you can trim down a bit? When we started looking at these views in our environment, we actually found some of the biggest consumers of resources were people that were no longer with the company. So this can be a very powerful way to trim cost out of your cloud utilization. And finally, last but not least, certainly, is the security aspect. So within Cloud Insights, we have a feature called Cloud Secure. And this is an ability to, with very minimal effort and input into the system, to detect ransomware attacks very quickly and trigger automated actions off the back of those. So what we do in Cloud Insights is have a machine learning backend where we monitor the environment for suspicious activity. So that just means something that looks unusual. So spikes in utilization, spikes in sort of moves and copies and things like that. Because everyone throughout their working day has a set of files they typically work with, a number of files that they will typically interact with. And when that skyrockets, that's an indication that something bad is going on. It could be ransomware, it could be someone downloading a customer list or something like that. But what's important in Cloud Insights is that you can identify that very quickly and trigger an automated action. Ultimately, there's no such thing as preventing ransomware because anyone can have an off day when it comes to security and just click something they shouldn't have clicked, but by that time it's too late. So it's more important, we found, to detect it quickly and then do something about it ASAP. For instance, take a snapshot. So that about rounds it off to some practices we've adopted that have helped us navigate this data fabric. Hopefully, it's something that if you are kind of exploring your options in terms of moving workloads here, there, and everywhere, we can help you with that as well. I don't expect anyone to take my word for it. So a free trial is available, as any good SaaS product should be, to test it out in your own environment, to start looking at your kind of hybrid cloud and multi-cloud environment, whether it is performance or optimization or security you're particularly interested in for your environment, or potentially and probably all three. I would invite everyone to kick off a trial today. You get to use the product for 30 days, no credit cards or anything like that required, and deploy it in your actual own environment. And on that, I will close out this part of the demo.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Josh. That was just fantastic information. Looks like an amazing tool. We are going to open it for Q&A. We do have a few questions coming in, and as a reminder, you can post your questions to the questions pane, and we will take those now. So this one definitely looks for you, Josh. First question, is there an API?
Yes, of course. Again, I mentioned before, it's not up to us to tell you how to do your how to run your environment. So everything you've seen in the UI today is available to be consumed via API as well. We actually build the UI on the same API we expose to customers. So absolutely is the answer to that.
Excellent, thank you. Next question, are there different modules to license?
Not modules per se. So there are 3 different editions of Cloud Insights. There is a basic edition, which is available free of charge to all NetApp customers for NetApp infrastructure. And that gives you kind of performance troubleshooting, monitoring, and all that good stuff for anything effectively with a NetApp badge on it, whether it's on-prem storage or cloud storage or HCI or something like that. There is the standard edition, which is, I guess, most appropriate for those that are, the technologists amongst us that want to see the speeds and feeds for multi-vendor infrastructure and multi-cloud services and any applications running on that for kind of performance monitoring and troubleshooting use cases. Finally, there is the premium edition, which adds in the ransomware capabilities we saw briefly earlier, expands out the, I guess, more business-oriented use cases. So there is a reporting studio available for kind of business intelligence reporting as well, and adds more flexibility in terms of how you visualize the data there.
Excellent, thank you. A couple more questions we definitely have time for. What devices are supported?
So in a nutshell, just about everything. So there are a variety of baked-in collectors. Saw briefly earlier, there is over 100 baked-in collectors where it's a case of clicking on the tile and saying, here's the username and password for this particular device, and Cloud Insights goes away and collects that for you. But we also support data ingest from third-party or open source collectors, such as Telegraph, for example, a very popular one in terms of performance monitoring, things like that. So there's not really anything that springs to mind that we can't collect. I would just say the more, I guess, the deeper you go down the kind of DIY rabbit hole, there is a onus on the admin in question to ensure that they're sending only the metrics they want to know about to Cloud Insights, just for the sake of reducing noise.
Great, thank you. Next question, maybe a bit of a follow-on to that. What kind of alerts get sent out? Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, so there's baked in, we support email and webhooks, which I would find most commonly our customers would kind of prefer to use the webhooks approach. We've got some built-in templates for things like Slack, where a lot of dev teams and SRE teams will like to get their alerts through there. But the beauty of webhooks is that it's totally open. So whether it's you want to send an alert to your event manager and maybe raise a ticket, or maybe you want a text message, or maybe you just do want an email. The support of webhooks kind of gives you the kind of ability to do what you want with that information and send it to where you want to.
Excellent, thank you. Let's see, last question. It looks like we do have a couple more coming in, and I think we've got time for that. Okay, is there an interactive demo? I know you mentioned the free trial, Josh, so maybe you could talk to an interactive demo. Sometimes that's a good next step before they're ready for the trial. And then, if possible, maybe elaborate on what it entails to execute the free trial, what steps the client goes through. Could you elaborate there?
Yeah, so we don't offer a kind of canned demo environment. One of the challenges we saw on that is, not everybody wants to see, NetApp speeds and feeds. They may not have any NetApp in their environment, and it might not be interesting to them. So we have made the trial as easy to get running as absolutely possible. So, I mean, it is SaaS, so there's not anything to install or configure. You don't have to provision any big servers or anything like that. We found that trial customers could get up and running within half an hour, if even that. So we really question, well, do we even need a demo, because people really want to see this in their own environment. So to that extent, we've got a trial there that is available to anyone to get up and running, and we have great feedback on that it is very, very simple to set that up. So we would encourage anyone that wants to kick the tires to just get a trial going in their own environment, whether that is a big production scale sort of thing, or maybe just in a lab. It could just be install an agent on your own work laptop to start messing around with dashboards and alerts that way. So there is a very, very low barrier to entry to actually start having a go with the tool.
Excellent. And when they're ready, should they contact cStor, I would assume, or NetApp?
Either way, absolutely.
Great. We do have a question for one of the attendees who came on a bit late and was inquiring about the security. The question reads, was the cybersecurity touched on Cloud Secure?
So yeah, we rounded that the end of the demo with the Cloud Secure capability.
Excellent. So as this is recorded, I would just encourage that attendee to maybe listen back through the recording once we send the link out, which we will do following this event. That actually concludes the questions for today. I wanted to circle back with Neil and just see if you had any closing thoughts. Thank you so much, Josh, by the way. Neil, any closing thoughts?
Nothing for me, Kim. Thank you very much, Josh. Excellent demonstration as always. And nope, that's all I got for today.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much again, Josh, for your time and expertise, and for everyone joining us today. We look forward to seeing you on another event very soon. Hope everyone has a great day.